Hello. Hello, everybody. Just gonna wait to connect and let people join in. Hi. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of Intercultural Conversations. And I actually love doing that, love saying that it's Season 2. So, yes, welcome. I'm gonna wait for a little more people to join in. Yes, Nilo, let's go. Hi, Savi. Hi, Dom. Hello. So yes, actually today, yes, Dilo Pratha for Intercultural President. I hope that happens one day. That's the point of this show, apparently. So today, actually, we're going to be talking about architecture and design. And for people who know me, they know I'm no expert on that, because I've recently been building a Pinterest board for the house that I want to live in the future. That's my vision board for my home. And if you look at it, it looks like the aesthetic looks like it's for 3 or 4 different houses. So I can say that it's still a journey for me to be understanding design, aesthetic, and architecture in general. But I can definitely tell you one thing. With spaces, I feel very emotionally connected. I mean, just to give you an example, Bombay, the city that I live in currently, I feel emotionally connected with the buildings that I see and the places that I go to. There are certain pockets of places that I go to that move me very, very much. And I've often thought, if you take away that from Bombay, if you take away the buildings, if you take away the structures, you take away anything tangible away from a city, does the city then still have the same kind of feeling to it, the same kind of cultural significance to it? So it's often been my thought, for sure. So, people build spaces and spaces influence people. So it's very difficult to then separate culture and separate society and separate community from design, right? And that can be anything from a building to a park that's built, anything from urban planning to your house that you're making. So I thought it's very important to have this kind of a conversation, and I definitely thought it was an important conversation to have when I was back in France, and we were in the countryside, and I was traveling there with a German friend of mine, Eva. And Eva, I hope you see this. So yes, shout out to Eva. And Eva said that, I don't know why the French, when they have so much of land, we're just passing through the countryside and there's so much of land, why do they build such tiny houses? They own the entire land. And that's also like a reflection that I saw of how culture then influences how people even perceive space and how they perceive even building. And I mean, these are just mosaics of thoughts that I had, and I felt like there needs to be a cultural thread to this that I definitely needed and wanted to discuss. And who better to discuss it with our, if not the guest that I've invited today. Today we're going to be joined by Saurabh Suryan. He's an extremely talented visual artist and architect. And there's a lot to say about Saurabh, but if I have to say it in a couple of words defining his work and what I think of his work, it's that Saurabh has done his bachelor's in architecture from Sushant School of Architecture and Art in Gurgaon. He is currently the co-founder of a studio called Studio Suryan Dang, along with his co-founder Lokesh Dang. And they help architects across the Indian landscape document their work. So it ranges from anything from a chair to a skyscraper to anything that architects have helped build and create. And I mean, this is a bit about his work, but I've also spoken to him in the past and I have seen his work, and I've told him that when I see his work, it's very vulnerable. He kind of always has a story through his work and relates it to the people who kind of occupy this space as well. So I thought he would be the best person to have on the show and kind of help us understand how architecture, how people and cultures actually view architecture and design. So yes, and I see a couple of more people joining in as well. Thank you for being here. And Saurabh Suryan to the live. Hello.
Hi,
Hi,
I hope I'm
Saurabh.
audible.
Are you able to hear me? Are you able to see me?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you
It's
can't
good,
see
it's
the
good.
space around me, but hopefully someday you'll be able
I think
to.
you can see the space around me.
Yes, I
Yeah, I
can.
was just trying to justify my role here with the bricks,
You have an
Yeah.
affinity to bricks, don't you? A little bit of an affinity to bricks. That's an understatement.
I actually don't like bricks as much, but yeah, yeah. I mean,
You
that's the
don't?
building block of everything, being in
Ah,
India. No, I'm sort of over bricks.
oh, too much of a bricks in your
Yeah,
life
yeah,
already. Yeah. So,
yeah. Too much bricks. Yeah.
thank you, Saurabh, for being here. Thank you for taking out the time for this. There are more people joining in as well. All good?
Thank you so much. I, yeah, it's all good. It's all good. I was trying to
Yeah.
manage the volume here. That's all. It's good, it's good. Yes. I was listening to you describing architecture. It was very interesting to me because more than architecture, I like the perception of architecture and how people are able to read it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's more important than the absolute value of it,
Yeah.
and that's true for other things also. It's not about how great, like, how great something has been cooked. It depends more about like how you feel that it's been cooked.
Mm.
So something which is very basic, which you may find like very obvious in a say a hotel setting, but might have more value if it's cooked by your mother or your father. So it's a relative value to design as well. That where does it come from, and what kind of value does it hold for you?
Yes, it's definitely about the value. And
Yeah,
actually, the thing that I didn't mention in your introduction is that you actually go around the country, document
yeah,
spaces
yeah,
and going
yeah.
into probably unsuspecting spaces as well and documenting them. So, I was
Yeah, yeah.
wondering, what are the differences even within the country that you've observed culturally of how people perceive aesthetic or how people perceive design? Are there any notable differences that you have seen?
Yeah, yeah. See, most of the observations will be from a sort of a city boy perspective because I've always been part of cities.
Hmm.
And it's the observation is also mid-journey because it's only been like 10, 12 years for me to be looking at, things and being able to translate it or to document it. So it is also something I would say it will be ill-informed or ill-educated of me to be able to make that kind of a perception of it.
Hmm.
The thing is that it's also frequently changing. So how people see spaces or how people see design and materials, it's also constantly, what we perceive things pre-COVID and what we perceive things now, they mean different things.
Oh.
For example, when I used to photograph houses, and when we speak of like these spaces, I would say my life is sort of split between two areas of observations. One is most of India, which is actually I also derail, so just like pull
Don't
me
worry,
back.
go for it, Saurabh. We want to
I
hear you
split into
today.
multiple threads
Everything
of
that's there in your
thoughts at
brain.
times.
Hmm.
So I recently was on an assignment in Himachal for an Airbnb, and I met a journalist who was based out of Noida, and it was around I think 2 degrees freezing in the middle of the night, and we were having dinner and drinks. And he says that when I started journalism, he started writing about things, but he couldn't really understand it. And his mentor, he had asked him that how were you writing, and he was able to he just like very sort of innocently said that, like, I want to write all the stories that are there in India. And he was able to sort of like tell him that there are two versions of India. One is Bharat and one is India. So the story of India is wildly different from Bharat. Bharat is most of what the geographical region that we look at. And India is within that 20, 30 square kilometers of the city center that we say that it's India. And, like right now we're trying to discuss architecture and how it impacts people and communities and cultures. But it's a very small audience that it actually impacts. Even this conversation might not even be feasible in terms of their understanding, language, pace of talking, all these things. Like most of the people who belong to this version of Bharat are, it's not even in the same umbrella. So when we say about like the differences of spaces, they need to be addressed from like these two different perspectives. And most of my work like sort of stays like that. So during the day, what I do is I get commissioned to photograph other people's houses and like office spaces, institutional complexes. And, these are all like very well intended spaces, which are well curated. There's a lot of money involved, there are a lot of clients involved, contractors, people like, the best of the game, the people who are involved in it, best of the institutions that are involved in it. And how it's been changing is because for residential specifically, there was no space such as home office earlier. People were just happy keeping not keeping an extra room, but post-COVID, everybody is like sort of interested in it. So times also sort of allow you to think of spaces in a different, version or different spectrum of it. And when I move around Bharat, that's a different story altogether. There, you don't need architects. And most of India that's being built has been built without architects. It's been built with artisans. So, and a basic person, if you speak of an Indian citizen, they knew, like even including my own nani, like my grandmother, my mom's mom, she knew most of the skills. She could lay a brick, she could lay a flooring, she could fix things. She was a carpenter, all those things are there. But I think it's also the beat of the economy that we are sort of segregating these jobs. A carpenter has become a carpenter, a barista has become a barista. We are trying to like segregate and section every skill set, which was part of our basic lifestyle or basic understanding of spaces and design. Like people could like fix up their chairs by themselves or fix a rickety door. Now you need like a handyman. So that's also like sort of a Western aversion towards doing things. And in India, I think we are way too sort of occupied or too used to services. As Indians, we are like too sort of spoiled for it, like house helps, and we need like every section of our life to be segregated in a manner that everything needs to be sort of delivered on a satin pillow, and then it needs to come to you at the minimum cost possible. That's why a lot of companies also struggle, operating in India. May it be like Uber, Ola, or Amazon, or anybody for that matter. So yeah, there are these two different versions of India, and then design operates very differently in these places.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm definitely seeing that shift from a very personal level as well. I mean, of my little knowledge of design and architecture, I usually kind of correlate it to people and correlate it to cultures and correlate it to community. And India being a collective culture, I think that definitely influences what the architecture is, or how you build, especially a home, or how you build any kind of space. So I think before, when it was more Bharat than it was India, I have a feeling the way spaces were built was for family, for people to come together, from a community perspective. So when I go back to Mangalore, to my ancestral home, the way it's built is for people to meet at some point. And that's kept in mind. However, now we're moving to much more nuclear settings, and that's also changing. So do you think that, architecture is changing with the kind of decisions that the culture is making at the moment? It's becoming more isolated. And I'm not talking about it from a post-COVID era, right? Even pre-COVID, I feel like spaces are now becoming more isolated because younger individuals who can now, for example, buy houses are becoming more individualistic too. So the spaces kind of evolved with that. Have you made that observation as well?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
I think you are like absolutely right when it comes down to keeping things a bit more integrated in terms of being able to share it with
Mm.
people. And what it allows you to do is that you're also sharing resources. You're also sharing problems. You're also sharing appreciations,
True.
and it becomes sort of a larger setup. And especially, I can speak of like say Spanish or Latin families or even Italian families, Indian, Chinese. They used to have this sort of a like an ancestral like parental home,
Mm-hmm.
and parental home is sort of a like a Swiss knife of spaces. Like it can really expand and contract and accommodate anybody.
Yeah.
Kids go out for foreign education, they finish it off, they can come back. It'll absorb them. Uh, uh, Kids are having grandkids, they also absorb
Yeah.
them. And then it had like a capacity to sort of increase or decrease in size and scale and functionality, and resources. And it was able to do all those things. Now, because most of post globalization, people are moving away from. I mean, this is very true for down south, for say Chennai and Bangalore and a couple of more cities where the IT has really changed the format in which we have started seeing living spaces, right, and even office spaces for that matter. And I feel it's very new, like for design for India, and to be able to understand the necessity of design, or like the necessity to carefully curate where you function, where you live, is very new. It's very, very new because you need
Mm.
like a certain kind of like capital or money to be able to think that.
True.
And India, I feel in general, is like at least 50 years behind, where you will be able to sort of say that, I want to design my space. These are my requirements. This is what I need for next 40 years, and be able to criticize that. So that has not started to happen until now. People are still, sort of be able to only reach to a superficial point,
Mm.
saying that I see, like how you were mentioning Pinterest, right? So images, like I know I'm in the profession of like creating, visuals for spaces to make them look good,
Yeah.
but images are also like they're a big lie.
They're misleading,
Images
no?
aren't spaces. They are super misleading because it's my perspective of that space. So if I tell you the space is good, for example, like a hotel brand hires me or a restaurant brand hires me and says that make this space look good, make this space look inviting, I can make that happen. But it's a convenient thing.
Mm.
It's not the reality of it, because there are so many dimensions to a space. I'm only trying to give you like that particular two-dimensional perspective of
Mm.
it. It doesn't tell you how the space sounds. It doesn't tell you what is the humidity of the space, what is the reverb of the space, how tired you were when you visited the space. Is it on the ground floor? Is it on the sixth floor? Is it by the sea? Is it in the hills? So all these things, they sort of make up a space, and you enter a space which is and transition. Like you transition from one to the other to the other. So the sequencing of the rooms also sort of make the experience richer or less, or less rich, like
Mm.
just to put it like that. So when you see nuclear spaces, they are built with a very particular perspective, which is utility. And firstly, then you're given a patch of land, then they're subdivided into like multiple homes. Then by floor plates, they're subdivided into further individual units. Those individual units have independent bedrooms, because of course you have to have it, because if you're living here, then everybody should have their own space for them to like sort of relax, unwind, and do their own business.
Mhm.
And what it's doing is that it's able to sort of give everybody an individual perspective on life and space, but it's also sort of splitting everybody apart.
Yeah.
So it's a very sort of a nuclear thought process. If we all can like share a Netflix password, then we can also share our spaces. So that's also one way to like really look
Yeah,
at it.
yeah. I
And
think my
when
my
you
house look like my parents' house looks like a jigsaw puzzle in that way. Also, there's some thread
yeah,
that
yeah.
connects it, but my room looks completely different. The living space, the common space looks completely different. The bedroom looks completely different. Yeah, I mean, I don't know when they built it, if they built it from the perspective of how they felt. But then at the end,
Yeah,
I think the goal was met, right? You feel at home.
yeah,
I feel at
yeah.
home there, irrespective.
Yeah, I mean, see, spaces that are built with a lot of empathy, they are they're not built, they're not designed, they're just grown. They grow.
Yeah.
And they transform over time. And these are like just like collage of spaces which come together. They might even not look visually Pinteresty, but they function, they serve the purpose that they want to function. So of course there is design, but there are aspirations too. And
Exactly.
aspirations, they build better spaces than designed spaces can possibly build.
You think so?
So it's a very like a sort of, it's a very contemporary narrative of wanting to design spaces and to do that. Of course do it, but do it for, do it for the sense of that, I don't know, like don't have coffee at night because it won't let you sleep. Like that's a logic that you operate on. So similarly for spaces, you have to have a logic that you want to operate
Yeah.
on. It's not about putting a material.
I mean, yeah, if I built based on my aspiration, my entire house would be golden color. And I don't know then if anybody would want to
And
share
where will you
it
keep
with
the jewelry?
me. But yeah, that's something to think about, right? And it, when you were speaking, it also reminded me of there was another guest called Krish Ashok. He's the author of the book called The Masala Lab. I don't know if you've heard of it, but he was talking about authenticity. Right? There's that word authentic doesn't kind of hold true to anything. So if a person wants you to make a place look good and for what it is and their perception of what good is that even authentic? Who is it authentic to? Who's viewing it? Who's taking it? So yeah, I mean, ownership of who is actually responsible for making it look authentic or it being perceived as authentic is a completely different conversation, of course. But then it also makes me think of the ingredients in a way that go into building a space. Of course, like you mentioned, there's empathy, it's the feeling, it's the aspiration. There's so much more that goes than brick and other material. Brick, something that's not your favorite anymore. But I mean, but you can't take away from that either, right? I mean, there was a time where I would, travel to different places in India and I felt like the aesthetic was so true to that place. And of course, because of work, I end up traveling to cities more. And, 10 years back, I would still see the quote unquote authenticity of the city in a way. But I think now materials and designs and so many other things are becoming so standardized. And somewhere I feel for a growing country like India, that's inevitable. Then with growth comes some sort of standardization. And then who are we to take away from that just because it doesn't look the way we want it to? So does it pinch you sometimes that, the story of the place is taken away?
You do need it. For anybody to grow, you need consistency, or you need organization, and it also means that you need to categorize people into certain brackets. And when you categorize people, and everybody does, like the why data is the new oil, because you're able to profile people and say that this is a city living man. He likes these things, and to eat, he travels in this particular condition. These are the brands he's wearing, and all these platforms, including what we are talking on, and our dear friend Mark, like they know what you like and what you dislike. So they don't offer you the things that you dislike. So the problem with what you're not being offered that you dislike, now you're getting into like a very sort of a polarized zone, because you want to be fed the only things that you prefer, right? And the thing with profiling is that you need to standardize certain things, because how else will you scale?
Exactly.
If you start customizing everything, you will not be able to scale. So the requirement with the growing population, I think it's a great thing that is being standardized. But there needs to be at least like 1% flavor of understanding and empathy towards design, and also towards like material consumption, because we are consuming right now like a ridiculous amount of material, and we are pushing so much of carbon emissions and demolition of older spaces that are happening, like all these like sort of tailored houses which happen for parents and our grandparents, and before that, they're all being like sort of taken down and dumped away.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just that it's not being wiped off from the face of the earth. It's just that it was a standing structure of material at some point. Now it's a demolished, material being dumped somewhere. That doesn't mean it ceases to exist. It's just that if you have a requirement, you also have a responsibility. So just by because also like things are being so privatized, there is no sort of rule book. There's no strict rule book that is being followed, which is true for a lot of why we aspire to, be like these Northern European countries, and America we look at, and then we look at the amount they consume, the amount they produce, and then the money that sort of flows around. So we are like very fancified by the economy of it. But the thing is that you also need to build with a lot of responsibility. And this is the right time to really think about it, because I mean, heat waves are there, rains refuse to stop, the showers are like so unpredictable. You can't like sort of work around it. So you are already seeing such immediate impacts that people's lives are changing, and ultimately it's a changing economy also. Like untimely showers will lead to untimely crops, leads to untimely produces and money, and then with that money people buy stuff. So it's sort of a circular behavior. So when you're producing and disposing and consuming at such a large scale, we really need to be conscious of, one is material and environment. The second thing is what you're building. It's not about just selling a flat to a young couple. And the third thing is that it's going to last for a really long time. What you put on the face of earth, like, it's going to last like a really, really long time. So what is the kind of legacy you want to leave behind,
So what I'm hearing
in
is
terms of its build
you're
strength?
like, okay, fine, standardize, but standardize responsibly. Because
Yeah,
standardization
exactly.
comes at a
Yeah,
cost that is not responsible.
yeah,
But do you think architects, like
yeah.
young architects, are thinking that way, especially from like an Indian context, if you had to say?
I would say they're more conscious, but again, it takes a lot of courage and heart to be able to say no to your client. Be like,
Mm,
don't do this and do this, because this would be more responsible. And uh, and what it really does is that certain people are in a position to say no to that. Okay, like I can assure you of that. Like, so I've met people, they have the conviction to do that, and they can really say that, boss, don't just build it for the sake of building it.
mm,
Like, go back to the original requirement of the project or the purpose, and say that, do we really need it?
mm,
Go back to the basic. Like, do I really need to spice up my space so much that it like ceases to be what we originally wanted to do?
mm,
And I know, see, your requirement is like a floor, a roof, and four walls. That's all your requirement is. Now, when you start layering it up, is your aspiration. So where do you want to stop that aspiration?
mm,
Because everything that you take to build something, say a stone, for example, right? You're taking that stone, you're not manufacturing it. You're nobody who has a responsible sort of participation in creation of the stone, because it took millions of years for different sort of quartz and materials and minerals to be deposited, and then you get a single slab of stone. So you take it out of the ground, and then you want to call it a kitchen slab, a living room table, some kind of a backsplash on the bathroom. Now the thing is, you're only borrowing these materials. So if you're borrowing, which you didn't create, you had no idea. You probably must have had multiple, like sort of births for you to be able to see this material in action.
mm,
Now, if you're putting it somewhere, you should put it up with a certain responsibility, right?
mm,
And that is something, of course, it's changing with younger designers,
mm,
but I think there's more room for it.
mm,
So the works that I do on the countryside and during my travels, which is also, so the show is called How to Make Love, and this is essentially going to independent studios and schools and colleges of architecture and design, and to be able to talk to these kids, saying that when you draw these two lines, which says that, I want to put a 16 marble somewhere, that has a repercussion. Like, it has money involved, it has climate involved, it has a lot of responsibility involved, saying that I want to put this stone here.
mm,
So you need to think before you draw. Just don't draw. Drawing is very easy, putting material out,
mm,
convincing a client. It's very easy, and to see things of interest and do
mm,
that. But there are real operations, there are real repercussions of it. Like, I'll give you a very funny example. and most of my works are about the works that are not commissioned. They are all about sort of the satire or the comedy that is there in architecture. And this is an example from I think 2015 or 16. This was before I had done my own house for my parents in Delhi. I met my uncle, and he had bought a small patch of land in Gurgaon, and he wanted to do the house. So I gave them multiple options, and then we were working with it, and ultimately it didn't sit well with him. So he went ahead with the builder, and then they just moved ahead and built that. So one day we went to their house for one of the anniversaries, and then I'm sitting across like a similar brick textured wall, okay? And I'm sitting on the couch, and this is post dinner, so everybody's in a food coma, and I'm just looking at the wall, and I see that I don't know if you're able to notice, but when you see a brick wall, the shadow is at the bottom.
Yeah.
And because the most of the lighting is in the ceiling, so the lit up portion is on the top and the shadows at the bottom. And that particular thing was a wallpaper. And I'm looking at it, I was like, there's something odd about this wallpaper. So what the wallpaper guy had done was he had applied the wallpaper upside down. So the shadows were up. And I told him, I was like, this is a very funny mistake. And he said, yeah, I wasn't sure. And then he did it. And I said, no, it's not just about the wallpaper. So I asked him, I was like, what is behind the wallpaper? He said, it's a plaster, it's a putty. So I was like, what's behind that? He said, it's a cement plaster. So, and I said, what is behind that? It's like, it's a brick wall. So I was like, if it was always a brick wall, why do you have to layer it up so much and then apply a wallpaper? That too, it's incorrect.
Aspirated thought. You keep layering it up.
Yeah, but why are we layering things? Just do basic and then just move on with it, So, like it's really funny to me, like how our understanding of design.
Yeah, because I kind of understand your uncle, because we lay that trust in architects or people or builders or people who we trust our houses with. I mean, I don't know why he didn't trust you with it, but seriously, that's how a person who doesn't have the language necessarily to convey what they want in a design, we end up trusting and trusting somebody else to build our home. And that's the thing. That's kind of leading to my other question as well. So, like architects, they kind of help us with our aspirations in a way, especially when building something. And then I think the other aspect of it, at least for some people, is the artisans. The artisans who help either beautify or do something that is very niche to them, or that is passed down by hereditary and culture, and then that continues. And there's a different way in which we look at artisans. And then there is the wage laborer who's using his physical body to build something. And this was a recent revelation of the conversation that I was having. And I just realized that there is such a clear distinction. One thing is being built. For example, if it's a home, there are people involved in building a home, but there's such a bloody clear hierarchy of who gets the most validation or credibility after building something. And I think that hurt me a bit after that realization. I mean, do you see the distinction yourself as well? Do you think that it's fair? Firstly, like an architect, an artisan, a daily wage laborer who's building something, treated differently is a very simplified word to use, but perceived differently.
No, I understand the kind of dichotomy that this whole scenario has, because see, being in India, the reality is that it doesn't matter how great you draw, doesn't matter if you go to Italy and buy a marble or you go to China and put a furniture. Ultimately, the person, the hands that will actually put it in place will be somebody who's being hired for 500 rupees a day or lesser. Like those are the people who will be putting it together and who will be building it. So that is the point of contact. Now, the thing is that I think it's a larger creative debate to say that is the idea more important or the execution more important? You know, where does the credibility go and where does the sort of value go in that? And does with value comes more money or more fee or more gratification? Because when you want to say that I draw a brick wall and the contractor understands the brick wall, it needs to be laid for this dimension by this dimension, and a laborer sort of gets all that material next to the brick wall where it's to be laid. There's one mason that's putting it together, you know. So I feel like there's a larger choreography to the whole scenario, and it is being treated or understood very differently from different people, because
Exactly.
it's not about it's not about the execution, but it's more about how did the whole team come together and said that is this possible or not, you know. So I do understand certain people. I know practitioners like designers and architectural practitioners who value the artisans more than the client, because that's their real family. And if you don't have a compatible partner who's the artisan, you will not be able to do anything in your life if you really love the craft. Then there is the other side of the story, which is about, like I want to say that you can look at it like like if you really want to simplify it, one is like a pre-cooked ramen, and the other thing is a sushi, right? So for a sushi chef, the ingredients, the people who are getting it together, the guy who goes and gets the nagiri and the other fishes and the salmon from the sea, they know the tides, they know the behavior of the herd of the sea, the fishes, and they get it together, and where the wasabi is being procured, and so there's a particular there are nuances to it, and they're able to understand it, they're able to work with it. So they produce very less. It's a small quantity, but it's the best of the best. The other thing is like you're producing like packets and packets of ramen noodles. Now it doesn't matter who's cooking that ramen noodle, because there are such less instructions and there are such like expertise that are involved in it. Then this credibility sort of goes away, and people don't appreciate. We have never heard of ramen chef, like an instant noodle chef. We have never heard of them because there is less credibility in that. So I think like the intricacy sort of brings in that kind of value and credibility. But where it really lies is also within that group of laborers or within the group of mason, there'll be somebody who will be more respected and less respected. Within the group of contractors and artisans, there'll be somebody more respected, less. Same thing, like amongst if a project is coming together, there'll be somebody sourcing the material, there'll be somebody drawing, what needs to go where. It'll be their team, there'll be client and client's family, there'll be contractor and contractors people. When you're sitting with like 10, 12 people on the table, they all have a certain role to play. So it's an equal participation, but of course, like everybody doesn't get the same, piece of the cake. They all sort of work differently in terms of like whose role is how much. And this value judgment is also very sort of relative.
Yeah.
It could be relative to its client's perception. It could also be relative to contractor's perception. Because by the end of the whole exercise, I can assure you, it's true for most of the projects, contractor makes more money than the architect.
Yeah, he does.
So it's not like they're being less rewarded, So in terms of money, they are being rewarded, but there's also the joy of craft. So certain people do it for that. Certain people do it for the cost of it. So if they're able to, like, different people are in the game for different things.
Yeah, I think this is something I still need to kind of marinate with. It's a recent revelation actually that I had. And yeah, it's very easy for me to come with a bias and say, oh God, so unfair, there is more. But how then, like you said, how then do you define value? For me, the value is that person in the sun laboring through and then helping build something. But for somebody else, the value is the design, the concept, the creativity. So then how do you kind of judge and manage that? Well, I mean, I hope that's something to think about for our listeners as well.
Yeah.
And I mean,
so idea and purpose of like, doing this different sort of, so we do a lot of these documents and books at the studio, which sort of takes you behind the scene, in terms of its building process, like when you build spaces together, because we see like, developing country and there's construction happening right, left, and center, highways being built, new airports are coming up where it's not even required, all those things are happening.
Mm-hmm.
And the impact of it is really large. So when you want to tell a story which is not about just the space and a pretty visual which is on the cover of AD or El Decor or a Pinterest board, the ground reality is that there is a lot that happens before the space, and there's a lot happens that's after the space. So after the space is the impact. Then when say I build a house for somebody, or a friend builds a house for somebody, and they spend their lifetime 40-50 years in it, and it like outserves its purpose. What do you do with this house, or what do you do with this space? You demolish it, and then it goes somewhere. So that is the afterlife of the space, and then more and more things are being demolished, and will demolish more in the coming future. And what is before the space is actually where all these materials are coming from, and the highways that are being used, the people who are involved in it, the families that are involved in it. So I'll give you a very brief example. I think for a construction industry, Chhat Puja is the biggest festival that can possibly happen. It happens twice a year, and it's very much related to. I'll tell you how different these worlds are. Okay, so when you look at so architectural education or design is a fairly modern thought. Okay, this formalized version of it. We go for education, we come back, we are like, you're a head architect, or you're that kind of a sort of master planner. It's a very sort of a westernized concept where when we see it in that kind of a behavior, like when you compare to a lawyer or a doctor or an expert like that. So in terms of education, it's like a specialized behavior. And what we do is we follow a Georgian calendar, which is very different from your Indian calendar. And Indian calendar is very cyclic. Like it responds to the moon cycles, it responds to certain alignments of stars. So imagine that, somebody who's drawing what needs to be built and the actual person who's building it, they are working on different time zones. They're working in different clock. So how do you even imagine both of these worlds meeting? We don't I was recently just yesterday reading in Economic Times that how most of Delhi sort of turned their back towards Yamuna, and the reality of any space that is built in India is not complete. Any structure in India is not complete until a person from Bihar or Jharkhand goes and touches it. That's the only way sort of when it comes together. And they are the only ones who are sort of be able to still worship water, because we have all sort of, turned away from these water bodies because we have modernized plumbing. You turn the tap and this water comes out of it. But they're able to sort of go back to the original source of water, which is being polluted from the same industry they're part of. And it's really sort of like dreadful to see that, and this happens twice a year. You see so many visuals of these women, these men, they go down to the river of Yamuna and they're able to sort of worship and bathe and drink that water, which is filled with like toxic chemicals and ammonia froth. And we don't look at it, we don't look at it. So my idea is that why don't we actually go there and then show this reality of, when you draw, and this is the guy who's actually putting it together, and this is how he celebrates life. He celebrates life on a completely different calendar, and his world is very different from yours. He lives in a Bharat, you live in an India, your economies are different, your food is different, so these are two different worlds. So there needs to be merger, there needs to be some kind of a common ground where we can like sort of come together and put these stories together.
Definitely, that definitely has to be a merger, because me just thinking about it, it makes so much sense to me. Imagine people who are actually building and designing to kind of see all of this, get a perspective to this, can change so much, can change the way we are designing even. You never know. But I think Unmukt, hopefully I'm pronouncing it right, has a question. And he says, isn't the value of a space defined by the functionality and the number of people it serves? He means the skill gets rewarded. I believe he means the skills of the laborers, architect, etc. But it's still going to be a space for the person who's going to eventually occupy it. So why think about it in that way is what I believe Unmukt is trying to share. And at the end, whoever
Yeah.
builds it, whoever conceptualizes it, is to serve somebody to occupy it. So why
Yeah.
think about anything else? Is I'm assuming what Unmukt means. Unmukt, let us know if it's something else. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, yeah, see, also, we all live in different realities,
Mm.
you know. One day I'm very utilitarian, other day I'm very uh, driven by a lot of design and aesthetics, you know. Someday I'm only driven by economy. So we are also like multiple people within our own
Yeah.
heads.
We have
So, of
multitude.
course, space is also like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we do. We perceive reality in different dimensions and different uh, like for example, you know, if my niece draws an apple, it means a lot to me than somebody drawing a hyper realistic picture of an apple. I will probably look at it for some time. I will have an appreciation for it, but it still doesn't have the same impact as my niece drawing the apple,
Mm.
a terrible apple for me, you know. So value of spaces are also that, you know, they're relative. And we are like being in an Indian economy, culture, um, and it's the space. So we put a lot of sort of reservation and a lot of value in two things. One is a house, and the other thing is a marriage, you know, a wedding. So, and these are like sort of very emotional places to, you know, get anybody involved in.
Mm.
And I mean, it's a larger question, and you know,
Yeah.
like we can
I
always
think
come
that's it.
like sit and
That's
dissect it
different
further.
intercultural conversations
Yeah,
invited for that
yeah,
conversation as well, Saurabh. But I mean, I've already taken so much of your time. I usually end it with a different question, but for you, since
yeah,
I've
yeah.
learned also so much, I'm going to change the question a bit for you. Before we go, if you could give us some perspective of what's the future of architecture and design, you know, culturally speaking as well. Because, you know, for me, a huge part of culture is static, doesn't change. Deal is asking, do you do weddings, Saurabh? By any chance?
No, man. Rarely I do.
Culturally speaking, India is big
It
on
has to be
weddings.
Indo-German, and that's the only way I do it. Otherwise, it's not possible.
Do you need to be paid a lot to do weddings? No,
Nothing like that.
some other advantages. But I just wanted
Yeah,
to know, right? Because for me, as an interculturalist, a part of culture remains static, and a huge part of culture keeps changing.
yeah,
You know, it's part of the present, it's part of the
yeah,
future,
yeah.
etc. So, I mean, do you see architecture's future also changing rapidly at the moment? I mean, what's your perspective on it?
I think I think again like there'll be different versions of it because it's moving so it's like trying to define try to map like a cloud of smoke, you
Mm.
know. Then by the time you're done like drawing it, it's changed into like another form, you know. So to be able to sort of document it or to say anything about it, it would be too like untrue. And future of design, I think, will be it's already very exciting to like put it like that. Different people are stepping, you know, into different people's shoes, and they're crossing boundaries. Architects are doing interior designers are doing furniture people are doing lighting, and
Mm.
lighting people are, you know, sort of styling. They're like, so there's a lot of like architects are photographing, telling, you know, visual stories and making films and stuff like that. So right now it's a very exciting time because we from the like when we started getting money from the 90s until now, it's been like a good period of time. So if you're taking 3 decades in picture, you have some understanding of, you know, maybe one generation that has gone and seen the value of design
Yeah.
from other countries and other places, and we have a lot of like production capacity when it comes to design. So I see a lot of like more and more. So I'll just mention like what's terrible going to happen and what's good that will happen. So I'll say first, maybe I should say like what are the terrible things that will happen, you know, so we can end with like good things. So terrible thing is that I will start with design education. More and more people are getting educated in architecture. I feel what was for most of early 2000s till like 2010, 2015 for engineering, where everybody was picking up IT and wanted to be a coder and wanted to go to Silicon Valley. I think that's exactly what's happening with architecture and design now. Like more and more
This is
kids.
new to me.
Yeah, there's a ridiculous amount
I
of
never
people
wanted
just like,
to. You know, certain things. Wow, that's
we are not beating the
no,
right drum,
no,
like
I'm not clearly. Sorry.
so more and more people are like sort of picking up architecture and design as an aspiration because they see like there is a certain value, the style, whatever they want to see things as in a design profession. So more kids are stepping into it. That means the space is going to get more and more crowded, and that is actually very good from a client's perspective because they will have more options to play with, and you will get affordable design, and things will get more and more competitive. So once a room gets competitive, then there's a lot of creativity because people want to fetch out like designs right, left, and center and give you multiple options to work around with. That is very good from like a consumer point of view. The terrible thing that will happen is that we will be consuming more, we'll be producing more, we'll be disposing more. So that's all. That's the other terrible thing. That's
Don't worry. I think there'll
third
be like
thing
a
is
school in Europe or a school in Bombay that will start a course for building consciously, building sustainably. So
yeah.
I'm sure some course will
See,
come
the
up.
thing is, we don't have to actually look at it that way because if you build small, if your gestures are like sort of very conscious and very mindful and little, you know. For example, like our room now, we see like large windows, we see large span rooms, free floor plates, even in offices and stuff like that, which modern concrete has allowed us to do. If you see, earlier spaces used to be small because it used to be built by a man or two, you know. So your sort of material can only be so large to put up a beam together or to put up a wooden rafter, so that the span is such that only one or two people can carry. But with modern machinery, you can really put out, you know, like a column-less structure which is like 150 feet wide and stuff like that. So that will also change. So tech will also allow you to do such kind of ridiculous stuff, like maybe put up buildings together in 15 days, you know. So do you really need, you know, same thing, the same question is with Blinkit and all these delivery apps. Do you really need your milk in 6 minutes? You know, aren't you okay with like 20 minutes, or can't you plan better? You know, because there are like terrible versions, you know, of it. So I mean, we really have to. So we really have to like step back a little, and think that do we really need to produce things on such a you know, lightning fast, blinding pace that we don't know what we are producing, and it has to be so quick, so terribly quick that you know, nobody's able to have fun with it. People who are drawing it are not having fun. People building are not having fun. People who are living in it. I'll give you a very small example. I met a couple of years back in Bangalore, and they're my friend's brother-in-law and brother and sister-in-law. So I was talking to them. They're in a very high position in an IT company, and one is a lawyer. So they were saying that, you know, we want to hire somebody, but we don't know who to select and stuff like that. And it was for an apartment. And they said, you know, we want to go with this. There's something called live space. Okay. And live space is standardization of spaces, and they want to work through an inventory and stuff like that, which is very good for a certain for a certain purpose. But the kind of people they were, I was able to read into them, and they said they want to hire live space for their work. And I asked them, you know, like, where do you go for your when there's an anniversary, like when you guys want to celebrate anniversary, where do you go? So they said, no, we have a couple of nice restaurants, and you know, we go there. The wine selection is good. We like, it was like she was pointing at the husband, like he loves a good steak, and we go there and have a stay. And I was like, do you guys dress up for it? And they were like, yeah, we like make a whole thing out of it. So I was like, why don't you go to McDonald's on an anniversary? So they said, no, that would be stupid, you know, like that's like every day something, you know, I go to the airport and like maybe pick up McDonald's because I don't have time for it, or I don't want to think about it. So I said, like, if there is something, you'll probably spend like 50, 60 anniversaries together, you know, and that's going to happen once a year, and you're putting so much mind into it. and the space that you want to live in, and the space that you will occupy, and it will change your psyche, and probably your child will also come into this space. Why do you want to do a McDonald's version of design there? Why don't you want to put in effort and time and intricacy where it's actually required? Like put a little more thought into what you do. Everything doesn't have to be fast fashion version of everything. Design shouldn't go that far ahead that it'll happen like that. But also good things about what will happen in design in future. I mean, it's just my perception of it. You're getting very interesting versions of designs where people are able to push material and technology, and you're able to do more and more things with it. Things are getting like highly customizable, so you really, so chances of error and wastage are really getting reduced within that particular working parameter. So that's one good thing, because you're getting, say, I'll just speak of technology wise. There you're getting plumbing fixtures that uses less water. You're getting smart, appliances that use less electricity. You're getting smarter sort of air conditioning solutions. So those are the things that are being sort of optimized more, and then they are able to do.
I can't hear you.
Consuming at this point.
Yeah, now I can.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, I also mean
so that's the technology
from a
point of view.
people and cultural perspective, right? Do you think that eventually then people are going to come back to their roots, probably at some point in the future? Because I see that happening, at least in Europe, it is happening. You're going back to certain things. So maybe at some point houses will become smaller because you want artisans to build it, or you want two men to build it, or two women to build it, whatever.
Yeah.
So do you see that happening from a design perspective?
Yeah.
Or people are just wanting like
I was
100
actually
feet.
coming to that. Yeah, I was actually coming to that because when you reach peak congestion, that is there with, I think, fast food at this point. People are stepping away from it. People are not happy about sodas. People are not happy about too much sugar. People are going vegan. They want to go dairy free. Because we consumed ridiculous amount of it in past, and now there's an antithesis of it, that they want to step away from it. So when you're building so much, when you're layering up your spaces so much, when you're producing, consuming so much, you want to go back to the basics, and you want to do bare minimum that's possible. And I see so many people, because of remote working and other hybrid models that are there for people, they're able to work from anywhere. And I like, even for example, for me, I work from 15 different places in a month. So that is only possible when these sort of digital infrastructure is in place, which wasn't, even until pandemic, it wasn't possible. We were pushed to develop these infrastructures, and we're sort of reaping the benefit of it because I mean, of course, like, terrible times, you're made to invent newer things. So we want to sort of, with what I'm trying to say is that with the flexibility of these technologies available, you're able to rethink your lives. You're able to rethink your spaces. People are rethinking children as well. Do you really need to bring a child to this world? There's so many kids that are out there. They need to be adopted. Do you wish to relook at that whole thing of parenting? So people are rethinking spaces also. That can we live in borrowed spaces? Can we live in community spaces? Can we go back to a farmland, grow there, eat from there, and then live a very low impact life? So it's, like the time is such that it's allowing people to do that. And there is a whole cultural change that is happening, which is letting people do that. So it's only for our observation to see like how far it goes and how all of it sort of comes together, and in what versions it comes together. But it's very exciting. Currently it's very exciting for people who want to do like, the best of the versions of design. It's very exciting for people who want to do moderate design as well. There are services, there are people available for that. And there is also a space for people who don't want to design at all. They want to just...
I want an open farmland. I will have a...
Yeah, I mean, why not? Why not? Space is what you call it, So if you want to call a small room your space, that is your space. There is nobody else trying to tell you that, this is not an, it doesn't make anything less of a space if it's, your way.
Yeah, I mean, before we go, and I like this question also actually. Word Studios is asking thoughts on futuristic cities. Firstly, I mean, that's a good question. Firstly, that word futuristic, if I'm living in it, how is it the future? Right. And the word futuristic, I think people correlate that to technologically advanced. Then how technology then is going to affect cultures and what that's going to do for the way we live, etc., etc. But yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on futuristic cities? I mean, I'm assuming they mean it from a design and architectural perspective.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you're right. Actually, there are two ways to look at it. One is how does it change us as people,
Yeah.
and how does it change in terms of technology? So I think technology we have discussed quite a lot, like what all it allows you to do. Like we're having this conversation because some college kid was able to sort of create a platform, and then somebody took over, and then they worked on it, and then now we have a platform where we can chat about things and people can join that room. So technology is very important, like because when you want to put something physical or you want to put ideas together, technology plays a brilliant role in it. So there's no denial about it. And I don't want to talk about what Saudi is doing and building linear cities.
That was mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
It's like a ditch. They built it in a ditch.
Yeah, it's a ditch. It's like a long corridor that's being built. Again,
that's fake money. Only sheikhs can do this. Like seriously. Okay, what do we do? How do we build more bizarre things? Like for example, there's marigold plants in Dubai. It's not supposed to sustain there. Marigold on the street. I mean, it's a desert. And they just make it possible. That's one aspect of a futuristic city for me. They make unbelievable things possible. So I think that's good and bad. But I just hope that in the future there is more community.
I think it comes with a lot of ego actually.
You think?
Because if you have the money and if you have the power, it's very egoistic. Like if the plant refuses to grow or a flower refuses to grow in a certain setting, don't push them to grow there. Don't force them to grow there. So I feel that is unnecessary. Like don't do it. Don't build like a couple of 100 kilometers long mirror walls just to make a statement out of it or call it a future. So again, like homes and GDPs, they work differently. So that's also the problem with it. But when we say that, how will it be for people of the future to see their spaces? People want to be, I think, a bit more conscious. Now, whether it's generally conscious or marketing conscious, because these are two different things, like global warming is also a discussion that how much of it is true, how much of it is point of discussion and made up, like is it a narrative that's being sold to us? So similar thing with conscious living is also that it needs to be truly green. For it to be truly green, you need to build less. You have to build in a manner that you should be held responsible for everything that you're building. You just shouldn't be building for the sake of it or your client wants to build it. Like for example, Sheikh says, build me this thing, and even after nature telling you, boss, don't build it, they're still doing it, And I mean, I know there are examples of beautiful cities like Bombay because, they were like reclaimed land, they built the city, there's a beautiful infrastructure, and it has existed for past 300 years. So all those like beautiful narratives are there and we forget about it. How we were able to manipulate a piece of land or 7-8 pieces of land into, forcing it to be a city, which it wasn't. Right. So there are examples of it, but I feel like people are getting more and more aware of things. And with a lot of data comes your choice. So now you're able to choose from it. Earlier, you could only be able to choose from what is being given to you. Like similarly, like, to be able to consume content, earlier you could only switch between like channels, and then the provider chose what you want to see. Your only option was to flip between those 50 channels and then consume. Now there are ridiculous amount of outlets in which you can watch anytime. You can watch. You can watch on a phone, TV. So there are multiple like ways of looking at it, and you can also do, which is a really great thing. You can not watch anything.
That's a
That's also
choice.
something.
No, but I think everybody should
Yeah.
watch Intercultural Conversations. That's no choice. Compulsory.
Yeah.
Okay.
recommend,
I mean, Leandro, hello, but we're about to leave. I can see that they have messaged, but we're just about to close the conversation. But everybody can see the episode completely after I upload it. And Saurabh, thank you so much. I just was not
No,
minding the
absolutely.
time at all because I wanted to keep talking. But thank you so much for
This
your
was wonderful,
insight.
actually. I didn't know exactly initially like how I would fit into all of this, but like now it's making sense.
Everything is culture. Everything in my head. Like for a biologist, everything
I
is
would.
biology. For me, everything is for interculturalists, everything, all context is cultural. So everything influence.
No, it's really commendable how you're able to pull all these different facets of life and work, and and try to discuss it here. And it really shows that it doesn't take ridiculous amount of time. It just takes like a lot of intent for it to come together.
Yeah.
So with great intent, of course, we're able to like have this in place.
Thank
Absolutely, thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thanks a lot.
much. Thank you so much, Saurabh. And I hope to see you
Have a
soon.
good
Whenever you're in
evening.
Bombay, you should meet
Absolutely.
me, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's meet up and discuss. Bye.
Bye. Thank you
Thank you,
everybody for
everyone.
joining in. Thank you so much.
Bye.